death were truly the end, why do millions remember what happened when their brain was medically offline? When the body dies, something refuses to disappear. A memory, a presence, a witnessing awareness that will not let go. So what is it that survives the silence? From the outside, death looks simple. A heart stops, a monitor flatlines, a body grows still. But inside the brain, in that collapsing universe of electrical storms and fading chemistry, the story is far more complex and far more mysterious. For the first time in the history, science is watching the brain as it dies, and what it sees does not look like silence. In 2013, at the University of Michigan Medical School, neuroscientist Dr. Zemo Borzgin and anesthesiologist Dr. George Mashaw recorded the brain of rats as they went into cardiac arrest. They expected a rapid fade into flatline. Instead, in the 30 seconds after the heart stopped, the dying brain showed a surge of synchronized gamma oscillation. The same high frequency wave associated with awareness, perception, and memory formation. The assumption that the brain simply goes dark at death was shattered. In 2022, neurosurgeon Dr. Asmal Zemer, working with colleagues in Canada, published the work Continuous EEG Recording from a Dying Human Brain, an 87-year-old patient who suffered cardiac arrest while already being monitored for seizure. In the seconds before and after the heart stopped, the brain showed changes in gamma activity similar to those seen in dreaming, memory recall, and meditative state. Then in 2023, Dr. Guizhou and his colleagues analyzed EEG from multiple terminally ill patients in a US hospital. Again, just before death, several patients showed a surge of coherent gamma activity. Not random noise, but a structured pattern associated with complex processing. These findings echo earlier animal work and are now part of a broader picture reviewed by Schlobin and colleagues in 2023. Gamma oscillation, the very rhythm that supports memory and conscious experience, may be intensified at the edge of death. The dying brain is not simply shutting down. For a brief moment, it may be waking up. While neurophysiology gives us one half of the story, human experience gives us the other. In 2001, Dutch cardiologist Dr. Pim van Lommel conducted a prospective study of 344 cardiac arrest survivors across 10 hospitals of Netherlands. About 12 to 18% of these patients reported a near-death experience, a structured, vivid episode during a time when they were clinically dead. They described leaving their body and watching resuscitation from above, moving through darkness or a tunnel, encountering a presence of light, reviewing their entire life with overwhelming emotional clarity. At the University of Virginia, psychiatrist Dr. Bruce Grayson systematically studied NDEs in cardiac patients and developed the NDE scale, showing that these experiences have consistent structure across culture, out-of-body perception, intense peace, life review, light, and profound transformation afterwards. Between 2008 and 2014, Dr. Sam Parnia led the AWARE study, awareness during resuscitation across 15 hospitals in US, UK and Austria. Out of more than 2,000 cardiac arrests, about 140 survivors were interviewed. Nearly 46% reported some form of cognitive experience. Around 9% met criteria for an NDE, and about 2% described detailed awareness of their resuscitation, including auditory and visual detail later verified by medical staff. A newer multi-center project, AWARE-2, continues this work using EEG and cerebral perfusion monitoring during CPR. Some patient displays brain activity pattern suggestive of covert internal awareness during period when they had no detectable pulse and were clinically dead. The message is unsettling. In at least some cases, something is happening in the mind when the body appears completely gone. Modern psychology argues that the mind does not just fade into darkness, it fights. When the body begins to fail and the brain approaches its final threshold, something extraordinary happens. In those last fragile moments, when oxygen slips away and neural networks begins to disintegrate, the mind enters a state scientists call the transcendence response, a psychological and neurobiological surge designed to preserve identity, meaning and memory. And it is in this thin, flickering space between life and death that near-death experiences are born. One of the most mysterious features of NDEs is the out-of-body experience. Psychology explains this through the breakdown of the brain's body schema, the internal map that tells us when I ends and the world begins. When the parietal cortex loses oxygen, this map dissolves, this self detaches. Suddenly, a person may see themselves from above, not because their soul has floated away, but because the brain's sense of position has collapsed inward, releasing the mind from its physical anchor. Yet for those who experience it, this moment feels more real than reality itself, as if the body was only ever a temporary home. As the visual system shut down, darkness encroaches from the edges of perception. What remains is a single bright center, a tunnel leading to an impossible radiance. Psychology calls this the cortical disinhibition model. When retinal cell dies unevenly, central vision becomes a final window of light. But to the dying mind, that window becomes a pathway, a promise, a direction to move toward when the world behind is slipping away. The tunnel is not a hallucination. It is the brain's last attempt to make sense of world dissolving into nothingness. And then comes something even more mysterious, the panoramic life review. The dying brain, flooded with neurotransmitter, release memory in rapid vivid cascade, traumatic events, childhood moments, people long forgotten, all surge to the surface with emotional force. In psychology, this is seen as a final integrative function. The mind gathers a story, compresses a lifetime into seconds, and presents a narrative of meaning. It is the brain's masterpiece. It's a farewell performance, a whole life understood at once. Research from Dr. Mary Thornard and colleagues at the University of Liege compared NDE's memories with memories of real and imagined events. NDE memories showed greater clarity, emotional depth, and self-referential detail than both real and imagined memories, more like core life events than dream. Many describe meeting a loved one, a guide, or a being of light. Psychology sees this through the lens of attachment system and internalized figure. Deep emotional imprint is stored in the limbic brain. When the self weakens, this figure rises to consciousness not as a memory but as a presence. They comfort, they guide, they tell the dying mind that letting go is safe. To the experiencer, these moments feels holy, transcendent, and infinitely compassionate because they come from the deepest emotional architecture of human being. The greatest question arises here: why do these experiences feel more real than ordinary consciousness? Why do people return saying, I wasn't dreaming, I was waking up? Psychology suggests that during the collapse of ordinary thoughts, the filter that normally limit perception falls away. With inhibition gone, the mind may enter a hyper-integrated state, a final surge of clarity where identity, memory, and emotion merge into a single luminous awareness. For some, this feels like consciousness stepping outside the brain entirely. Scientifically, we cannot say that consciousness survived death, but psychology reveals something profoundly human. In the final moment, the mind does not shut down, it transforms, it creates meaning, it reaches for connection, it constructs a reality that feels infinite, compassionate, and timeless, or extraordinary self. Neuroscience and psychology can describe what happens. but the question of why consciousness exists at all remains untouched. This is where a bold quantum hypothesis enters. For more than a century, we have known that neurons communicate through electrical signal, firing pattern and chemical messenger. But the mystery of consciousness, why we feel, why we know, why anything is experienced at all, has remained untouched by this explanation. The Orch-OR theory steps into this mystery with a bold suggestion that the mind's deepest activity is not purely biological, but partly quantum. Hidden inside every neuron are a microscopic structure called microtubules, delicate protein lattice that act not only as the cell's scaffolding but, according to Penrose and Hameroff, as tiny quantum processor. Within them, reality doesn't work in simple yes-no pattern. Instead, multiple possibilities exist at once. The way particles behave in quantum physics, when these possibilities collapses into a single outcome, the theory proposed a spark of awareness is born. Each collapses become a single frame of consciousness, and millions of these frames each second creates this seamless movie we call our inner life. In this view, consciousness is not a passive byproduct of the brain. It is an active, dynamic phenomenon emerging from the deepest law of the universe. And then comes a moment when life trembles. In cardiac arrest, trauma, or deep anesthesia, the brain's electrical rhythm falters. Oxygen drops, neurons lose their balance. Yet at this age, between fading biology and the unknown, many people report that the most vivid experience of their entire existence. They speak of tunnels narrowing into a radiant point of light, of floating above their own body with calm that feels impossible, of reliving memories as if time itself has opened to let them pass through. From a neuroscientific standpoint, the dying brain explains much of this. As oxygen falls, the visual cortex shuts down from the outside inward, creating the tunnel-like narrowing of vision. The temporal lobe erupts in unstable bursts, releasing memory with intense emotional clarity. Neurochemical wash through the brain. Endorphin softening fear, dopamine sharpening detail, serotonin painting luminous inner landscape. The boundary between self and body dissolve as spatial mapping area flicker out, giving rise to the sensation of drifting from the physical form. These are not signs of brain at rest. They are the last fierce attempt of brain fighting to hold on. Yet the deepest puzzle remains. Some of these experiences occur during period when the brain should be incapable of producing consciousness at all, when electrical activity drops to near silence, when awareness should be gone. It is here, in this strange quiet, that Orch-OR theory re-enters the story. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes inside microtubule, and if these quantum states can briefly survive even when neurons stop firing, then the early moments of clinical death may not be empty. They may be a state in which the biological brain is shutting down, but the quantum processes that generate awareness flicker on for a little longer. In that fragile window, the mind may experience with unusual clarity because the usual noise of the brain has fallen away. Hameroff suggests that the dying brain may even amplify this quantum moment, creating the crystalline, hyper-real quality so many people described in near-death experiences. This does not confirm the consciousness leave the body or travel beyond the death, but it does suggest that what we call the end might involve a more complex and beautiful transition than we once believed. There is another line of evidence that challenges our assumption. In 2006, neuroscientist Dr. Adrian Owen at the University of Cambridge used fMRI to study a woman diagnosed as vegetative. When asked to imagine playing tennis or walking through her house, she activated the same brain area as healthy volunteers. Martin and colleagues reported in New England Journal of Medicine that 5 out of 54 patients with disorder of consciousness could willfully modulate their brain activity during mental imagery tasks. One patient was even able to answer yes-no questioning using only brain activation pattern with no physical movement at all. The lesson is clear. A brain that looks unresponsive from outside can still harbor hidden awareness inside. If that is true in chronic brain injury, it may also be true in the brief, fragile period of dying. Science has not proven that consciousness survives death, but it has shown that the boundary between life and mind is not a sharp line. It is a twilight zone. In the final seconds, the brain does not simply go dark, it surges, it integrates, it reaches for meaning. Mind's last stand may be a psychological defense, a quantum echo, a biological surge, or a doorway to something we do not yet understand. What we can say in this? The final moment is not simple silence. It is a frontier, a threshold where awareness flickers, where memory rises, where something continues.